Welcome back, everybody. We hope you're well fed and well slept because it's time for some tennis. Now, there's just two of us here today. We are without our cohort from down under. We'll try to do our best. In fact, Candice, I thought we did pretty well last time. How about you?
I think so. I think the show has a different feel. Maybe we sound a little bit less smart, but we're maybe a lot more funny.
I think so. I mean, we got to be more funny than Steve. I'll also say Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there, and especially you. You're a mother yourself. Did you get anything fun today on Mother's Day?
Not yet. My daughter told me the other day my gift will be late. So maybe yeah.
I guess at least she gave you a heads up. That's all you can really ask for at this point in time. So that's not so bad. Happy Mother's Day to everybody. Now, I probably should have set this up to start with the men's draw, but I didn't. I didn't really think that well through. So we'll start with the men's draw because honestly, that's what I have pulled up here. We've got the first quarter here. Novak Djokovic at the top, Tsitsipas down there at the bottom. Some fun names down there in the middle, but I think will kind of be the theme of this draw in general, Candice. It probably is determined by the two seeds here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everybody is hoping they can see Djokovic, Dan Evans, round two, the rematch, I suppose. Though I wouldn't anticipate him maybe having the same issues that he did before. It seems like Evans has cooled off a touch, and well, you know Djokovic should be fired up for that match. Yeah, I mean, there's some fun names in here. You know, someone like a Roberto Carballes Baena, Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. We've seen Vasilishvili have a couple of decent tournaments over the last little stretch, I suppose. Berrettini obviously played really well this week. We'll see if he can back it up once again. But nobody that seems too imposing, I suppose. So you look to Djokovic and Tsitsipas. I would lean Djokovic, one, because I think at their best he is the better clay court player. But two, I mean, you have to think at this stage, Tsitsipas has been playing a lot of tennis. I mean, he's been making it deep and in many tournaments. And, you know, I wonder if we saw maybe a little bit of the effects of that in Madrid. Or, you know, Madrid is always a hard tournament, I suppose, to draw any conclusions from because the conditions are so different from the other kind of European clay court tournaments, but perhaps there might have been something to that. Certainly, if the two played each other, I would look to a fresh Djokovic over, you know, maybe it's Tsitsipas who could use a couple days off.
Yeah, Tsitsipas definitely built up a pretty long run of tennis here. This will also be a little different court. I mean, this is one of the slowest clay courts. It is outside, so it won't be like Madrid that's a little bit at altitude. It won't be like Stuttgart that's inside, or I think Munich was inside. Stuttgart was the women's tournament. So he won't have that advantage. Again, he's built up all the tennis, and it is a pretty tough little section at the end of the day. His first match, which will be in the second one, won't be too tough. But then he's probably looking at Berrettini, maybe Lajovic puts it together there. That won't be too easy necessarily. And then he gets Djokovic there in the quarterfinal. And again, that's just to get to the semifinals. So happy to avoid him. We'll see if Djokovic, has a good run here. Maybe he gets his first clay title of the year. I don't think he's gotten one yet, but this sets up nicely for him in this quarter, I think. Well, definitely excited for Dan Evans there. That'll be fun. And just to note, Mr. Berrettini there also playing a lot of tennis. He is currently in the third set in the finals. So we'll see how that goes. He was my value pick last week, and Steve's outright pick to win the tournament.
What?
That's
He
pretty
was.
ballsy.
I'm gonna take partial credit for that because I mushed him on into the finals there because he played against my value play during the tournament, and that of course is Christian Guerin, and he won the first set, and I was like, here we go, and so I mushed him home for you guys. It's one of my few good skills in life, but yeah, Berrettini playing well, and I think Steve has kind of always been really spot on with him as well, kind of saying he was going to really work his way in through the course of this clay court season, and I do think that has come to fruition a touch. One thing again, I think on the Tsitsipas note that I'm going to find interesting is, we know that Djokovic and Nadal are going to get it together in these tournaments. This is a potential one. It's, Rome is somewhere where both of them have had a tremendous amount of success. And I really wonder how much Tsitsipas has been kind of a beneficiary of that void there, with the two of them having maybe some earlier than anticipated losses in a few of these other tournaments.
Yeah, I think you definitely hit the nail on the head there. We do expect that to be our quarterfinal, but I think there's probably a little more doubt in Tsitsipas. Any other thoughts on this quarter before we jump into the second? Team there at the top, Rublev down at the bottom. And again, some names here in the middle, maybe a little more interesting. You've got Bautista Agut there in the middle. Gail Monfils is playing tennis this week, which is always interesting. Your buddy Guerin's there. So maybe this one's a little more competitive, but again, I still see us ending up with kind of the 2 seeds here in the quarterfinal. Can you talk me out of that?
Not necessarily. I mean, so often in these tournaments, feel like we found ourselves kind of shifting towards the middle portion of these draws because we know what we're going to get on the top and the bottom. This section I thought what has a little bit more competitive, I suppose. Someone like Garin could make a run. Even Rublev, you could see him making his way through here potentially. I suppose for me, the one that I would have a little bit of slight doubt for, I suppose, would be a team. Not to say he couldn't, go through here and win several matches, but I was a little bit disappointed from what we saw from him in Madrid. I would have anticipated him under those conditions to do better, and he has routinely done better at that tournament in the past. Obviously, his serve and that sort of a weapon is much more potent in a place like Madrid than you anticipate here in Rome. So I would say I was a touch disappointed. We'll see how he can, if he can back things up here and give a better performance. But of the two kind of heavy hitters here of Team and Rublev, I'd have more confidence in Rublev than in Team.
I agree. I think Team is building his way back into form here a little bit. He's been very honest about looking at his schedule differently. He was a guy that used to just play every single week. He'd be in a semifinal, a quarterfinal, 4 or 5 weeks in a row, winning tournaments a couple weeks in a row, just beating himself to death. And I think this is a good spot for him to get a couple matches under his belt. I think people do look at this as kind of a tune-up for the French Open, even though there's a little bit of time here. He should, kind of smoothly make his way through those first couple matches. Maybe Monfils is there to kind of give him something that's a little different, a little, kind of variance that he's might not have been seen there, but he should be sitting there in that
Monfils is a little different, that we know.
That's saying it nicely sometimes. And I think you're right. It's going to be Rublev there. The Rublev section is tougher, having to play the winner of Garin Bautista, a good, I assume there. He's, going to be obviously rougher than I think anyone Team faces, but this is a nice spot for Rublev, who, didn't have too much success in his first run here, but, ran into Hubie Hurkacz and lost in 3 sets there. But I think this sets up nicely for him and is a good spot for him to grab a quarterfinal and then maybe even be competitive in that semifinal there.
Definitely. And I think for him, he would maybe be hoping for Garin over RBA, just because I think Garin is the more talented of the two, but he just doesn't maybe quite have the seasoning. I think that's what we saw from him last week. He has all the ability in the world to beat top players, but maybe that kind of belief or confidence in himself throughout the course of an entire match against a big dog is still lacking a touch. So I think that would be the preferred matchup for Rublev versus RBA, who's been there a few more times.
All right, you ready to jump into the bottom half?
Yes.
Third quarter, Diego Schwartzman at top, Medvedev down here at the bottom. Now, this is the quarter that's open. This is the one where I wonder if we'll see either seed in the quarterfinal here. Uncle Tony helping FAA there. He did get a first-round win. For whatever reason, the ATP likes to make it difficult to make content by starting the first round on Sunday when they're finishing qualifiers. I don't know why they do this. Please stop. So, some other names there in the middle. We see Golfan, obviously. Opelka won his first round match. I wonder how he'll do. Your buddy Karatsev is in here. How do you see this quarter shaking out?
This was far and away the most open quarter. I don't think that's any kind of a big secret. I feel like every quarter where we see Schwartzman, we've been trying to attack that. And this one we get a bonus because we get Schwartzman and Medvedev, who's a very vulnerable over the surface. I found myself leaning towards David Goffin. I love this quarter for him. You see Schwartzman going against Felix. That could be a long match potentially. Whether it's Kachanov or Delbonis, I think Goffin could grind out a match against either of them. And then kind of move his way through that top portion. And, whoever were to come out the bottom, I just don't see any terribly imposing names. I mean, Musetti has a little bit of talent, but he's been off form recently. I'm not really scared of Riley Opelka over a clay court surface. Maybe it winds up being Karatsev from the bottom. But I think that's well within the wheelhouse for Goffin, who's been quietly playing some nice tennis, and he's always a bit of a threat on this surface. So I like the Belgian, David Goffin, the veteran, to make his way through.
Yeah, Karatsev is who I had coming out of that bottom half. I think this is a nice setup for him. Again, getting to go again.
I think you're muted.
Ooh, I muted myself after
muted for the sneeze, and we didn't get him back.
Ooh, sorry about that. I think I've got Karatsev here coming out of the bottom half. I think, like you said, this is just a nice spot for him. Although you have a lot of good players, this is not necessarily their preferred location and surface here. You look at the top half, Goffin, I think maybe the surface change would be good for him. Hatchinov could take the top half, even FAA. So I was kind of floating around those three names. I settled on Hatchinov, but I think any of those are perfectly fine names. And I think Karatsev has a good chance to come out and win this quarter. We've seen him play very well. He's comfortable on this surface. Maybe Medvedev makes a little bit of run for no reason, but I've got Karatsev coming out of here.
I think this is the quarter, though, that provides value. If there's anyone you have a strong opinion about, because in some of these clay court tournaments, I think you just kind of get some residual value on guys because they're in the same quarter as Medvedev, and that's something that you have to take advantage of as long as you can. Because obviously, when we switch surfaces again, that won't be true any longer.
All right, any other thoughts before we jump into the Nadal quarter?
Nope,
Number
we're
four
blazing
as
through the men just like you like it.
That's it's a much simpler handicap, and when we get to the women's draw, you'll see how much more frustrated I am. But they did a nice job. They split everybody up, all the good players for different spots. Just the third quarter is kind of a pass because again, we come back here as Zverev, our top seed, our seed at the top, Nadal, the number 2 seed down there at the bottom, and although there's some names down there in the middle, I'm not sure I really care. Maybe Jannik Sinner gets a chance to shock Nadal here. That is going to be a really fun match. I've got that circled. That'll be one that I watch, one of the rare men's matches that I do watch. We'll see how everybody else does, but I think if Nadal can make it past that, he's cruising to a match with Zverev. Again, unless this kind of the most interesting match to me in the first round here in the top half will be this Nishikori-Fanini match. If either one of them, can kind of put it together here, that might be an interesting challenge for somebody like Zverev. But again, I think we're going to see a Nadal Zverev quarterfinal. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, we were all hoping we'd get Nadal Center just the other week, and we didn't. So we'll see if we can get it now. Obviously, they had a really fun match at Roland Garros, and Sinner has only improved since then. So that could be one well worth watching. Towards the top, I look to, maybe somebody like a Fognini, if he cares this week, making it through against Zverev. Obviously being in Rome, you would expect him to be, a little bit more amped up. So that could be a fun one between the two of them. But Zverev Nadal is the way that it tends to look, and Alex has had quite a bit of success here in the past as well, so that in and of itself could be a good match and a good test for Nadal. I think we're at that point where nobody is terribly worried about Nadal with some of these early losses because we have so much belief that he's going to come around and get it together in time for Roland Garros because we've seen that so many times. I think if he were to go down tamely in this tournament, then maybe a few kind of red lights start flashing. So this is a really good quarter for him in that it's one that he should be able to come through, but one that I think is testing enough that we'll get a good barometer of where he is right now.
Yeah, it's what I'm excited about here, too. I am just a touch worried about Nadal. He doesn't seem to be kind of at his peak, and we see some of these other players kind of rising up. I'm really curious to see how the draw shakes out in Roland Garros. But again, these are similar conditions. I think it'll be good for him to get tested by somebody like Sinner. I think the match with Zverev will be good for him. Hopefully this is kind of a nice tune-up tournament because I like greatness. I would watch him win the French Open over and over and over again every year forever. It's just fun. I don't know why I like that, but I do. So we'll see how he does this week.
The mental aspect, if anything, is worrisome to me too. I mean, obviously we've always been concerned about his body breaking down, but I think what's been more concerning to me over these tournaments is that it feels like when something hasn't been working, obviously maybe most notably his serve a couple weeks back, it felt like he got so visibly frustrated in match, and that's not something we're necessarily accustomed to seeing over a long stretch of a match, right? We're used to him being able to kind of tweak and adjust, and if anything, just fight and push through. And so it's a little bit of that mental lapse that I feel like we're seeing, and that's really not something I ever thought I would say about him. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, if you're maybe struggling a touch with kind of mental focus, clay court tennis is certainly always going to test that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think you're right. It's a really apt comment. He has not looked as sharp and as focused. He does. You see a lot more. It's not just even emotion, just almost fear and self-doubt in little ways. Whereas before he would just kind of bull his way through things. So we'll see. Again, he didn't really play much tennis last year. He hasn't played much tennis this year, and it could just be he's working himself into shape and a form here. We'll see. But I think we'll have a nice week this week. Any other thoughts on the draw before we get into some of our picks?
Nope.
All right. We'll get started here. Steve didn't give us anything. He's very busy. Apparently, it was his mom's
Steve.
birthday and Mother's Day. So
Oh, he had to get a big gift then.
the double. So
Yeah.
I think
He
it's
didn't
like
have time to look
4:35 in the
because
morning.
he had to make all that money for the gift.
So nothing from Steve today, but we'll start with you, Candice, here. Your ace, and you kind of tipped this a little bit earlier. Novak Djokovic. Break it down.
Well, it's ironic because I would say of the two big name guys, him and Nadal, I probably have a little bit more confidence in Nadal at this stage than I do Djokovic. Obviously, we've seen them both be a little bit wobbly on the bits of form we've seen during this European clay court swing. I went with Nadal for two reasons. One, I feel like his quarter is easier, significantly easier than Nadal's. So I went in that direction thinking, okay, if both of those big names were to have some lapses, I trust Djokovic to be able to come through, if only that the matches that he's likely to have here are significantly easier right off the bat. The other thing was price. I mean, we always expect Nadal to be very short in these tournaments, and deservedly so. But there were a few spots for Djokovic. I was seeing 7-2, 4-1. That just feels big. It feels like maybe a little bit of an overreaction from what we've seen, earlier in the swing. So I opted to go with him.
I like that. Now, I did go with Nadal. I agree with you that maybe the beginning of Nadal's draw is a little tougher, but I'd honestly rather play Zverev in the winner of the third quarter than have to play Tsitsipas in the winner of the second quarter. It's Rublev there. It's something like that, or maybe Team even. So I did go with Nadal. This is a great tournament for him. These are great conditions. He didn't make the final last week, so he's had a day or two to rest and sort of recover, which I think will be good. And again, I do think this is kind of his big build-up event before Roland Garros. He generally wins this event, or at least makes the final and goes into the French Open in pretty good shape with kind of his clay legs all ready to go. So we'll take Rafa this week because never a bad idea to take him to win a clay tournament.
Yes.
Now, beyond just picking a winner, we try to go through and find a little bit of value. And the name that you like, Candice, was?
I like David Goffin. I really love that third quarter. If it's maybe a tricky one to have a strong opinion, but if you do have it, it's very, very attackable section. And I like the matches that are there, not only because the big names are maybe a bit more vulnerable, but I see potential for a couple of long matches for guys who he would be playing rather shortly. Obviously, it helps that he already has a win under his belt as well. But this is a surface that, in theory, should be very good for him. Slow. You can kind of drag out some of these matches. I love kind of a grinding type of player under those circumstances. So I'm going to go to Goffin. I kind of like what we've seen from him recently. He hasn't been getting a lot of hoopla. He's not making finals and stuff necessarily, but I do think he's playing at kind of that standard, consistent level you expect from him. This is a guy who he is what he is. The kind of players he can beat, and the ones he's likely not going to. So he's always a player that is very, very draw dependent on me, but I can see this one falling into line for him.
Makes perfect sense to me. He could definitely pop, and that's not too bad of a number there. I went with Andre Rublev. I'm seeing him in the mid to high 20s. I think I even saw 30 out there earlier, so keep poking around. I think he has a great chance to win that quarter. Again, Novak Djokovic will be the best player and the favorite in that match, but Rublev has been fantastic on clay, and I think this is just a nice spot for him. Maybe Novak gets slipped up a little bit. Maybe, again, he's not totally focused on winning this tournament. Still, again, trying to work on and think about what's coming the next few weeks. But it's going to be tough for him to beat Novak Djokovic. But if he can make it out of that second quarter, he's got to win that match, and then he faces Rafa. So in the mid-20s, I think I'm looking at some value as long as he wins that quarter. So we'll take the Russian there.
Yeah, the one thing I would say also, I suppose, to add on to the Goffin mark, I think I had seen, and there might only be one or two books that have it, but I think I had seen somewhere he was like 150 to make the final. Obviously, you need a big price like that because you have Nadal there at the bottom and Zverev. But if you have any belief that Alex could take out Nadal in the bottom, keep in mind that Goffin beat Zverev just in Monte Carlo a couple of weeks ago. So it's not the worst number in the world if you're feeling, a little bit sketchy about Nadal's form.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I'm going to go back to this one. I think it looks nicer. All right, we are jumping into our overvalued player, of course. Now, you started with the Austrian, I believe.
I did, yeah. I spoke about it a little bit earlier, but I know he's still kind of easing his way back in. I just thought Madrid was the perfect spot for him. We've seen him have success there before, and understandably so, given the likely conditions, being up at altitude, and you always know his serve and his power can come through there. I was just a bit disappointed with what we saw. That's not to say that he can't have success this week, but I'm not going to take him this week at a similar number to what we saw from him last week in conditions that are not nearly as favorable for him.
Totally agree with that one. I think the conditions are tough. The draw is tough for him. And another name that we tipped earlier, my pick, Stefano Tsitsipas, in the same quarter as Djokovic. His single digits to win this tournament off a couple very long weeks. It's just too perilous of a path, and the price is not worth it, given all, and even all those other little factors kind of on top as the cherry on the don't do this Sunday. So we'll be skipping on Mr. Tsitsipas this week again. He's been playing great. Congratulations to anybody that grabbed him early in some French Open futures. I know some people that have 18 to 1, 20 to 1, even better than that. Well done. Those numbers are long gone. But this week, not his week.
We need a checklist for how many weeks in a row it's been that one of us has had Tsitsipas overvalued. It's a testament to how well he's been playing.
It's absolutely, it absolutely is. Any other thoughts here on the men's draw before we switch courses and jump into the women?
Nope, I'm ready. I want a smile on your face now.
All right. You know I like this. This is more fun. Women's tennis is just more interesting. It's more competitive, but screw whoever put together this stupid draw for a second week in a row. The two favorites to win the tournament are playing each other in the first quarter. Last week, it was Ashley Barty and Iga Swiatek. This week, it's Ashley Barty and Aryna Sabalenka. Actually, the final that we've seen the last 2 weeks are probably the quarterfinal here. Now, I don't think it's as clear-cut as some of the men's sections we've talked about. Again, both of these women have played into back-to-back finals, very long weeks, and this court's, again, very slow, much different than what they were used to being indoors in Stuttgart at altitude in Madrid. So as you start to look at this, they're the better players in here, but there might be some opportunity for somebody in the middle there. What do you think?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, of the two, I'd be leaning Sabalenka. I'm sure most people would off of what we've just recently seen. Obviously, she's been playing really well, as has Barty, but I would just lean in her direction. I do think that bottom portion of the draw is a little bit easier as well. The top portion is tricky. I'll have a keen eye to that Caccia Reto Caroline Garcia match. That should be a lot of fun. If the Italian can come through that, I think she poses a little bit of a threat there towards the top. But for me, I think you are likely to see a collision course between your two big names. Again, I would lean towards Sabalenka between the two of them, but some potential fun matches, I suppose, in the middle, just maybe not ones that I would be terribly concerned about taking off the two big names.
In the slower conditions with the fatigue, I wonder if you could even get somebody. Sabalenka starts with, I think, Tormo there. Then you'll probably see Putintseva, maybe Pliskova. If she has to go Tormo, Putintseva, she is just going to be wiped out by the time she gets to that quarterfinal. Whereas Barty's going to have maybe a little trickier second match. I'm curious to see. I think Mertens will probably be there. Was really impressed with her comeback victory over Halep last week. As I've said before, she generally loses to the very best players, and she might to Barty here, but maybe this is a chance for her to kind of get one of those under her belt, kind of take advantage of somebody that's a little fatigued. But I do agree. I think this is the quarterfinal we're going to see. I'm looking forward to Ashley Barty Sabalenka 3. It should be a lot of fun here in Rome. So anything else to add before we jump into the second quarter?
No, it just should be fun. I mean, I think, tennis of any type is better when you have a bit of a rivalry. So it's nice to have one budding here on the women's side.
Yeah, it'd just be nice if we saw him in the final again, in the quarterfinal.
Yeah.
Enough of me whining. The second quarter, Sophia Kenin with a new coach. She fired her dad. Actually, so did Caroline Garcia. Bad week for dads. Maybe it was a Mother's Day thing. Who knows? Sophia Kenin's our seed at the top. Svitolina, our seed down there at the bottom. And this quarter is pretty open, in my opinion. There is a name that I've got picked, but I'm curious to see who you've chosen out of this group. I mean, there's Swiatek there in the middle. She is grouped in there as one of the favorites. We've got Muguruza, who we haven't seen play since she retired the last match. This will be her first, sort of real red clay match, if you will. So how do you see this quarter shaking out?
I thought this quarter was really wide open. I wound up leaning to Svitolina. I think the player who I'm most interested in seeing, though, is Zachary. I don't see her coming through, but obviously we've seen her playing really well recently, and I'm going to be interested to seeing how she can really translate her game to a much, much slower surface, because it has been that more kind of aggressive power play that's seen her have so much success recently. Will that necessarily translate here? I'm not sure, but I'm intrigued to see it. Obviously, she's likely to get Muguruza right off the bat if she can win that first round match. So that's probably the section I'm most interested in, but it's just from a watch perspective. I look for Svitolina to make it through, which is not usually a rousing endorsement for me. I feel like when I land on her, it's because it's more that I didn't like anybody else than I necessarily loved her.
Remember that sentiment, folks. I do have Svitolina making it through here, and I'll touch on her maybe a little bit more. Like I said, we haven't seen Muguruza play really on the red clay yet. I think that having to play Zachary in her second match is a nightmare if she does even make it there. As you look at Swiatek, who is again one of the favorites to win this tournament, as she should be. She's the defending French Open champion. Again, these courts are very similar to that. I think her game should translate nicely, but this is a tough draw for her. The first round match will be easy. I think she'll beat the absolute pants off Risk. I mean, that's going to be a 2-2 kind of situation. Then she gets Mahova or Keys, and I actually have a little money on Keys there at a big number to win that match. It's a small sprinkle because she's played well here before. She has the power that a lot of players don't to actually hit winners on these courts and has done well. Mahova is a very good player. We saw her play well last week. I think the winner of that match is going to give Iga a real challenge. We'll see who's there at the top. Maybe it's Kenin. I actually wonder if Krejcikova will be there. But by the time she gets to this quarterfinal against Svitolina, I think Swiatek will have kind of been put through the ropes. And Svitolina's won this tournament twice. She won in 2019, yes. And then I think Halep was our defending champion, but we'll get to her in a little bit. I mean, she's been comfortable here. She looked really, really good in the couple tournaments she's played. I've been inspired in her general level of fitness, and I'm happy to kind of back her at least to make this quarterfinal and maybe even to win the quarter and go beyond there. But as I said, we'll put a pin in that. Any other thoughts here on this quarter? Anything else stand out to you?
No.
Let's jump forward to the third quarter. Bianca Andreescu's name is here. I don't know if she is actually here. Last we heard from her, she was recovering or still having COVID. She was in quarantine for that. We hope that's going well. Hope she's feeling well and will be out here to play her first clay tennis match, I think, since the 2019 French Open. If she does, I think this is going to be very tough. Now, on the bottom, you've got Halep, the defending champion, somebody that you would feel pretty good about, but has stumbled mightily in the last couple of weeks. To lose to Mertens up a set, as impressive as that was for Elise, not great for Simona. How do you see this quarter shaking out?
I think this quarter is a bear. You mentioned Halep and how she's kind of stubbed her toe a little bit recently, and no real obvious excuse for it. She actually was quoted last week pre-tournament saying that it was the first time in quite a long time that she's been playing pain-free and has been happy. So, that's great. Hopefully we can see some of that translated into her on-court play, especially at this time of the year when you expect her to have a substantial amount of success. But, this is just a tough one to go through. I mean, as you mentioned, Andreescu, we don't even know if she's playing. Sevastova Teichmann could be a really difficult first-round match there between the two of them, quite the tussle. You have Petra in here. You have Ostapenko, who can get streaky at times. This is a really, really difficult quarter. When I went through it, I de facto wound it up with Halep. But it's another one that I just think it's going to be maybe a little bit of a bloodbath to get there. If you anticipate a Kvitova against Halep potential, the two of them here at the end of the quarter, I wonder how many, long matches the two of them have had before they even get there.
Yeah, it's as tough as I think it might be. It sets up okay for Halep, in my opinion. Kerber in the second round or the qualifier, I'm not too worried about there. Maybe Vondrousova, maybe Ostapenko's there. Not too worried about there. We saw her beat Vondrousova just last week. I think it was 2-4 or 3-4, something nice and simple. Kvitova's a good player, but has struggled here. Teichmann might be interesting, but it's just a nightmare of an opponent in the first round there. So Halep will, I think, be a little bit challenged, but at the end of the day, I think she's a big favorite in all these matches as we're going through. And, hopefully, again, she's playing pain-free, like she says. And, we see her, again, sort of put it together as she builds up to the French Open. But as much as I'm not thrilled to say it, I think she does win this quarter. Any other thoughts here for you? We'll jump into the fourth and final quarter here. Serena Williams, noted mother, our seed at the top there at 8. Naomi Osaka down there at the bottom, and just a mess of a quarter. Again, as we start to look at this draw, all the talent is basically in 2 spots, and then the rest of it's just wide open. I mean, good gosh, I don't know how you get excited about any name coming out of here. Serena's a very good player. She hasn't played on clay. I don't think she expects to play on clay very much. You know, Osaka hasn't played a bunch on clay and hasn't been very good. But, you know, how do you see this shaking out?
Yeah, I mean, this was really wide open because you have those 2 marquee players who have massive question marks. Osaka, many people have been questioning if she really is the best player in the world, given how much she's been struggling on the clay. Serena, I don't think you can have any expectations coming back after a bit of time away over this surface in particular. I actually found myself leaning to having some interest in Alexandrova. I know this isn't necessarily her best surface either. We expect her to do her best play on the hard courts, but I think she's been playing quietly quite well. Last week, obviously, she lost right off the bat, but she played against Azarenka. I thought she played her, fairly tough there in the early portions of that match before going down, kind of being blasted off the court a little bit there late, but she hung in for a bit against somebody who's done well enough over the surface in the past. Over in Stuttgart, I thought that she played relatively well before she ran into Halep and wound up going down a bit tamely there. But, this is somebody who, she's not one of the best on this surface, but she's passable enough that I think in a quarter where you could have some big question marks about the top players, that she could do a little bit of damage. Is she somebody who's going to win the whole tournament? No. But I would lean to her as maybe a rogue name in this section.
Yeah, this is one of those sections where, like you said, it's not Jennifer Brady's best surface. It's not Alexandrova's best surface. It's not Pegula's best surface, even Osaka's. But on these slow courts, to have the power that they do is a real advantage. They have the ability to hit winners here. I think it'll be really interesting to see who comes out of this section, just given that this quarter is so wide open. I was I'd like to back Nadia Podoroska. I haven't seen her play in a little while. Haven't seen her play on clay, and she's got a qualifier. Just a nightmare there in the first round. Serena, we'll see how she does. Bencic might be interesting, but she's got Pera there. That's the qualifier she's going to draw in the first round, who's given her some trouble to start the season. I think this is their 3rd time, and both have gone 3 sets. I can't remember if it's 1-1 or 2-0 Bencic, but they've been tough matches. It's just a really hard quarter to pick apart. And again, you'd be excited to grab somebody here who goes against a possibly not so great Simona Halep in the 3rd quarter, or whoever comes out of there. But what are you going to do? So we'll see. I think one of the big hitters from the bottom there, like you said, Alexandrova, maybe Pegula, maybe Brady, sort of put something together here and start finding a little success on clay, just with their ability to hit winners. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. And I think they all also, not only are they more powerful players, but I think they also all fit that mold of kind of that next tier. So if you have concerns about Serena and Osaka, I think Pegula, Brady, and Alexandrova are similar in that they're that next tier, in that you expect them to beat kind of all the B-list players, and they're just having trouble against kind of the real top dogs. So if those 2 look vulnerable, they might not even end up having Pegula side. The others might not even end up having to play one of them. It really leaves the door wide open.
Yes, indeed it does. I believe that wraps up the draw here. So let's jump into our picks. We'll start with your pick to win the tournament. You've gone with my very favorite. So happy that she got the win last week. She's just been fantastic, but I will cede the floor to you instead of just gushing like a fanboy.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Sabalenka here. I have been just so impressed from what we've seen from her. Obviously, very difficult or different conditions than what she saw last week when she was successful and for the bulk of this clay court swing. But nevertheless, I expect her to continue her form. She's just been too good for too long now throughout the course of 2021 in general. We'll see how Barty can kind of shake things back, with her streak sort of snapped. I wonder if she's able to kind of real bounce back into it, or if that rattles her just a touch. So I'm going to go with Sabalenka to get the job done.
Makes perfect sense to me. I love the pick. I hope you're right, except for just the simple fact that I have picked somebody else. And this is, very much kind of a hold my nose situation. So I'll take Simona Halep. with her easy draw there to win this event. If she's going to bounce back, which is she's more than capable of doing, this will be the spot. These are really nice conditions. It's a really nice draw. And everybody else is beating each other up there at the top half. So what the heck? Let's, I'll go with the name. I'll go with somebody that should be on the bounce back here. It's just a nice spot for her. So Simona Halep, I won't be betting on it, but I've got her to win. She's the name in my bracket.
Very cool.
Now, speaking of betting, your value pick, and you just touched on her a little bit, but Alexandrova here, you like her opportunity. Do you have anything more to add and kind of touch on again?
No, I would hope that we'd find some quarter prices there down the road because she's just that person, right? She's not going to win the tournament, but I think she could really do some damage. We spoke about she has that power in a quarter that just looks incredibly wide open. And again, I think she's been playing well. She's one of those players that if you just looked and you see round 1 loss, round 3 loss, you're like, oh, what are you talking about? But look at the players she's been playing against. She doesn't have anybody like that in here. I mean, you could argue that she has the names, but it's not the same level of ability on the surface. So I'm going to go with Androva at triple-digit odds. She has a big number out there. I was pretty surprised.
I did see some quarter prices just a second ago. She was 16-1 to win the quarter. You like that?
I do like that. Yes, that's very fair.
So hunt around. You can find that. There's a couple places slowly started to open those. My value pick, and again, I don't feel really great about this, but Alina Svitolina. She's in the mid-20s, high 20s here. I have picked her as my unforced error. I've picked her as my overvalued player a bunch of times, but what the heck? I put money on Karolina Pliskova last week. Why not Alina Svitolina this week? Let's do it, baby. Again, mid to high 20s. I like her spot in her quarter. Of course, it's tough. She's going to have to probably beat Swiatek and then either Barty or Sabalenka. But I wonder if they're going to be there. I think that the market is effectively assuming that there's a much higher chance of those women being there than I think when I look at their draws, when I think about kind of their fatigue and the weeks they've had. Again, and Svitolina has been here before. We talked about the ability to hit winners, and she doesn't necessarily have that power, but she has the intelligence, she has the accuracy, and knows how to play well in these courts. So happy to back the 2-time champion at 25-1 or better. Let me see. What is her to win her quarter? Ooh, plus 450 to win the second quarter. I don't mind that at all. I think that worst case, she'll have a little value you can buy out of there in the quarterfinal. Now, our overvalued player, you have gone with a Spaniard. How about Miss Muguruza?
I won. I mean, boy, she was much shorter than I expected. I think she was sitting around 12 when I was seeing her out there.
Yeah, less than 15, close to 10.
Yeah, which is very, very short. That jumped off the page for me when I looked at the outrights. We haven't seen her playing a lot, and that we spoke about her early portion of the draw is just brutal. So if she's not ready, she's in the wrong portion of the draw. But I was most taken by that price, way too short.
Now, my overvalued player, those of you might remember last week, I was very annoyed that they put Ashley Barty and Iga Swiatek in the same quarters today to play in the third round. I put them together as Ashley Swiarty. And as you may have guessed, I may be going back to the well here a little bit because they put Arina Sabalenka with Ashley Barty. So my overvalued player this week is Lisa Barty. Both of them are favorites to win. They have played the last 2 finals. They have played a ton of tennis. These are slower conditions. They are outdoors. This is going to be a little different than what they've done and had success. And they have to play each other in the quarterfinal. Why the heck are they both 5-1 to win this tournament? It doesn't make any earthly sense to me whatsoever. It's just mind-boggling to me. So, again, I'm going to take the 2 favorites that they decided to make the favorites that are in the same quarter, Arina Sabalenka and Ashley Barty. I will be happy to avoid Lisa Barty this week, Candice.
I feel like we need to have you in charge of like one of those games where you just like put a bunch of names together and we have to guess if it's a real player or not. Because I'm really good at that.
I think one of the things I'll steal from another show, we did a spelling bee one year, which was a lot of fun. It was just WTA, and you have some good ones there. Let's see. I'll get you right off the cuff here. Can you spell Pavlyuchenkova?
P-A-V, oh no, is it Lyuchenkova?
I believe that's correct. Well done.
Yes!
Bravo. So we'll get those together. I think that'll be a little fun.
I was worried about the L-Y order.
It is. You got to be very careful there. All right, folks, that wraps it up for us. Just Candice and I. No Steve. We'll try to get him back next week for all those different tournaments there. We appreciate you watching. We appreciate you listening. Be sure to find us. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. We've got a YouTube channel. We'd appreciate you following all that good stuff. And we will see you soon, folks. Have a great Mother's Day, everybody.